been a long hearing, I know, Mr. Chairman. First, thanks to each of you for your willingness to step up and to serve. And some of you are stepping into some really tough jobs. I know, Mr. Wolf, you've already been there, but it's getting tougher. And you say unprecedented in terms of the crisis, just to put a finer point on it. We have had huge numbers of people come over the border before. They tended to be single men. They tended to be from Mexico. But we've never had a situation we've had so many children and families coming over the border. And we've never had the asylum process be misused in this way. Correct. So we have in Ohio a strong interest in this, as all Americans do, because of the children and the human trafficking, but also because of the drugs that are coming over. And specifically, crystal meth is our new concern in Ohio. We're finally getting the opioid crisis somewhat under control, although we've got a long way to go, but at least we've seen some progress for the first time in 8 years. Now, directly from Mexico, pure crystal meth is coming in and in essence, creating an even more difficult problem for some of our law enforcement, and that's a psychostimulant as opposed to opioids, which is causing great harm. So part of the challenge we have is how do you get people back on the border, protecting our border from the drugs coming across, and the funding we've provided has been helpful, but not if the personnel are dealing with the humanitarian crisis. I hope we can pass a supplemental to provide some help on the humanitarian side quickly. Mr. Byard, you are being nominated for another really important job, FEMA. Seems like they never end. You know, there's a disaster every couple weeks, it seems like. And my home state of Ohio got hit hard recently. As you know, we had flooding in southern Ohio a couple months ago. Now we've had these hurricanes that touched down. We had 23 recorded tornadoes, 21 recorded tornadoes touched down throughout the state. 21 tornadoes, all in the space of one night, one evening, from about 10 p.m. till about 1 a.m. I was there in the vicinity and about 20 miles away from where some of them touched down, so I was right there the next morning, and I saw the damage firsthand and met with the first responders and thanked them, met with the residents, went to a shelter, took food and water, and the damage is unbelievable. You'll look at the numbers and you won't see the deaths that you would expect from such a disaster. It's a miracle. And thank God it happened at night when people weren't at the shopping malls, because there are shopping malls that are totally destroyed. People would have been killed by the dozens. But we do have incredible damage. And as you know, perhaps Governor DeWine has recently made a request for a national disaster. I'm strongly supporting that. I've sent a letter in support of it. My question to you today is, do you commit, should you be confirmed, on responding quickly to these kinds of requests so people can begin to rebuild their lives?
Senator, I do. You know, I thank you for the question. Thank you for the comment. You know, the 21 tornadoes in one night is, you know, that's devastating destruction, no matter what state it is. You know, the way I approach that is I'm asked a lot, you know, what's the worst disaster you've seen? And I've seen, unfortunately or fortunately, as an emergency manager, I've seen a lot of disasters. I always tell people it's the one that I'm sitting in a living room and everything the family owns is destroyed. It's their worst disaster. So we get caught up in numbers a lot. We get caught up in, you know, unprecedented, and it's there, you know. But, you know, what Ohio saw and the citizens of Ohio, it's devastating to them. There is nothing that we look at. There's nothing that, from a FEMA standpoint, that we don't actually have. We've got, you know, units set up to address when a declaration comes in. We have teams on the ground, as you know, with Ohio now. But, you know, we do, and yes, I will commit to very expeditiously processing disaster declarations from governors.
Thank you. We need to help quickly. The small businesses and the individuals who are impacted are hurting, and the community's responded. It's been incredible, but we've got to have some help, and we need it now.
Yes, sir.
Another program that you have responsibility for, should you be confirmed, will be the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. This is really important. Mr. Wolf was talking earlier about the increase in the domestic threat, and in particular, there's a domestic threat on a number of our nonprofits and faith-based organizations. This is a grant program that's meant to help them, provide them with some of the best practices and advice and counsel, but also provide them with some hardening for their facilities. I've heard a lot from the Jewish community in Ohio and been to some of the synagogues and community centers and schools that have been affected with graffiti and a lot of death threats, bombing threats. They depend on this grant program to be able to secure those facilities and to train the employees. I'm very pleased to see that security personnel can now be used with this federal grant money to contract with security personnel. It's a carve-out in our annual appropriations bill. It's not established as a separate program. It's not authorized. So I've introduced legislation along with Gary Peters, the real Gary Peters, who just arrived, of this committee. I'll tell you about that later. But to try to be sure that we can actually authorize this program and have some certainty about it. And so we would appreciate your support on that. We've authorized it at $75 million a year. That's $15 million more than it's now being appropriated. The reason is it's not going to our smaller communities, many of whom need it badly. So my question for you today, and for Mr. Wolf as well, will you support this vitally important program and commit to help us to get it actually into law, into statute?
Senator, again, a good question. You know, currently the grants within FEMA resides in the Resilience Directorate, which is not currently under my portfolio, if you will, but I do believe, as being a recipient of federal preparedness grants of various nature, I do believe in the importance of it, and I'll be happy to work with you, if confirmed, to better that program.
Mr. Wolf?
From a policy perspective, Senator, there's a great benefit both in the nonprofit security grant program as well as the grant program that's run out of the policy office when we talk about terrorism prevention. So from a policy perspective, there are many benefits to supporting that in the long term.
Thank you. This is the nonprofit security grant program, and again, it's one that's working, and we want to get it into statute to be sure there's some certainty for it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.